Welcome back to Watercolor Theory. In this week's episode, I'm going to unveil a 15 item, 20-point checklist to help have better outcomes. This Rhino and calf that we'll be doing 5 takeaways in under 10 minutes today really inspired me to utilize this list. And the painting behind me is the first painting that I've done following this list. And in brief, it's just different design elements and how to incorporate those or making sure you incorporate those because while they don't make or break a painting, they don't hurt a painting. And so, and it's just elements like that. It's not about make sure your drawing's perfect or anything like that. I mean, values need to be right. There's a point for using a design element like an S curve or steel yard if you're familiar with Edgar Payne. So it goes through some of those elements. And as I scored the Rhino and calf, I found that it was only 8 out of 20 points. And I'm like, even if I'm being kind, it might have hit 9. So I figure 10 is the minimum, and 12 or 13 is probably the sweet spot for getting it right. So, and most of the items that we'll be going through today are somewhat based on this transition. And that brings me to takeaway number one. Takeaway number one: two items can become one. In the case of the rhino mother and calf, they're so close to each other, they're practically touching, that from a distance, they are kind of one value mass or big shape. And then when you get up close, you see that there's a break there. And that break is caused by the rhino, the baby rhino, creating that negative shape around the mother's belly. So that's takeaway number two, using the objects to create a relationship between the objects. So two become one, and then as the one separate and become two, it's actually part of that calf that is making the mom stand out. And so that's kind of, it's just a takeaway. It's not part of the planning process of the list though. Takeaway number three: this painting uses value and temperature for contrast. So it's got both the dark and the light for contrast, and the warm and the cool for contrast. So other ways to use contrast would be texture and size. It also has a contrast of size where it's not too similar. It's a contrast between a big and a little. So it's got quite a few of those types of elements going on in it. It's just it doesn't have much of a story. I think that would help. Takeaway number four. This one I learned from a book, and I'll have to leave credit for it, type it in, but it's make sure there's continuity between your shadows. So, I mean, obviously, if the right side of something is in shadow, then if there's a cast shadow, that should carry off to the right. And then, I mean, obviously, unless it's a human and they're jumping or something along those lines, but make sure that there is shadow continuity. The other thing is more than likely where the shadow of, say, a leg meets the cast shadow on the ground, more than likely that shadow is going to be the same value on the ground and on, say, the heel or whatever part of the foot. And then, depending on atmospheric conditions, that shadow might fade as it moves away. So, I mean, the thing for a cast shadow is a strong light source that's close, but there could still be rain, fog, snow, some kind of atmospheric elements that are affecting how that shadow is cast. So this painting does have that element. And then takeaway number five: I already mentioned looking at the list of elements. This really shouldn't be a takeaway. It's the list of elements is more about planning, but it could also be about critiquing that this is missing some things. While it has vibrance and it has some cohesion in it, it's just it's missing a little something. And but it did inspire something. Sometimes that's what we need. We need those challenges to help bring us up to the next level. And I'm uh, happy to introduce this painting behind me, which will be a couple videos from now. Um, Going back into some travel type paintings of far off exotic places. This happens to be Vietnam, and I'll be doing a couple paintings of Vietnam. Um, I wanted to challenge myself. I avoid people, so I figured I'd do this. And then just part of going to the gym is either running on the treadmill or lifting weights, doing drawings and color studies, and going places for reference. Those are all part of us going to the gym for our craft. So I'm committing myself to drawing something, even though I might, like I used a projector. This is a 16 by 20. So I used a projector for it. But before I did that, I did three different charcoal sketches of it because I wanted to find those areas that are important. And plus, I wanted to know the design itself before starting to attempt to paint it. And bonus number 6, communication. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Our painting is worth 1,000 words. So if we're not conveying a story, or if we're not conveying our message, most of the time, if you're like when you're watching this video online, it's me running my mouth or the painting running its mouth. I have a painting in a gallery right now that it it's on its own. It has to be able to defend itself and explain itself. So we have very little time. So we have to look at the 20 point checklist, the sketches, the um, value studies, color studies, all the swatching. Everything we do is like we're writing a speech, and we're just running it through, rewrite and a rewrite. We want to get it right because we have one chance to get it right. So this is our TED Talk, and if we look at it that way, and but don't look at it with trepidation or fear, look at it as, oh, this is what I'm offering to people. So I want this is an expression of myself, not an obligation. So that long-winded explanation ends that.